Introduction of the main character. Ayaan sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the floor as the morning light crept slowly across his room. At 28, life hadn't turned out the way he'd imagined. Once a passionate writer with dreams of publishing his own novel, he now worked long hours at a dull marketing job he never cared for. The spark that once lit his eyes had dimmed over time, buried beneath bills, expectations, and silent regrets. His apartment was quiet, almost too quiet, a reflection of the emptiness he felt inside. Years ago, Ayaan had moved to the city with hope and ambition. But somewhere along the line, rejection letters, financial pressure, and the fear of failure pushed him into a life of compromise. He hadn't touched his manuscript in over a year. Friends had drifted away, and calls from home became more routine than meaningful. Still, he wore a polite smile and told himself that, someday, he'd chase his dream again. But this morning felt different. Heavy, uncertain. Something inside him stirred. A sense that life couldn't go on like this forever. He didn't know it yet. But today, someone was about to say something that would change everything. A normal day begins. Ayaan moved through his morning routine like a machine. Shower, shave, black coffee with 2 sugars, and a half-hearted glance at the news on his phone. The same headlines, the same faces, the same weariness. He dressed in a crisp shirt and blazer, not because he cared, but because it was expected. His apartment, minimal and tidy, echoed with silence, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock on the wall. By 8:15, he was out the door, blending into the gray rush of the city. The streets were alive with noise, honking cars, hurried footsteps, vendors shouting for attention, but none of it reached him. Earbuds in, face blank, he boarded the crowded metro and leaned against the door, eyes closed, waiting for his stop. At the office, nothing surprised him. Colleagues exchanged dry greetings. The boss barked updates about deadlines, and his inbox overflowed with uninspiring campaigns. Lunch was a soggy sandwich eaten at his desk, scrolling through social media, where others seemed to live fuller lives. It was just another day, predictable, routine, and forgettable. But the ordinary was about to be disrupted. One conversation, one sentence, would soon break the pattern forever. Introduction of her. She arrived quietly, without announcement or drama, the way most important things do. Her name was Zara, an old friend from university, someone Ayaan hadn't seen in years. They'd once shared long conversations about life, art, and ambition under starlit skies and coffee-stained notebooks. But life had drifted them apart, as it often does. So when he received her message that morning, "In town for a day, want to catch up?" he hesitated. Still, something pulled him to say yes. They met at a quiet cafe tucked between 2 bookstores, a place that felt untouched by time. Zara looked different, older, maybe, but brighter. There was a calm confidence in her eyes, the kind that only comes from living authentically. She had left the corporate race years ago and followed her dream of becoming a documentary filmmaker, traveling, telling real stories, and somehow making it work. Ayaan watched her as she spoke, a flicker of his old self reflected in her words. There was no rush in her voice, no performance, just honesty, warmth, and a deep sense of purpose. He didn't know it then, but she wasn't just there to catch up. She was about to give him the words he didn't know he needed. The conversation begins. The cafe buzzed softly around them, the clink of cups, murmurs of nearby conversations, a mellow jazz tune playing in the background. Ayaan and Zara sat across from each other, steam rising from their mugs. At first, their talk was light, memories from university, mutual friends, funny incidents that drew genuine laughter from them both. For a moment, it felt like time hadn't passed at all. But beneath the smiles, there was a quiet tension. Ayaan's eyes lingered too long on the street outside. His responses were slightly delayed, thoughtful, as if weighed down by something unspoken. Zara noticed. She always had a way of reading between the lines. "You don't write anymore, do you?" she asked gently, not accusing, just curious. Ayaan hesitated. "Not really. Life got in the way, I guess. She nodded, stirring her tea. It usually does. Silence fell between them, not awkward, but heavy with meaning. He could feel her gaze, steady and kind, urging him to say more. But he didn't, not yet. She leaned back, eyes never leaving his. What happened, Ayaan? Where did you lose yourself? The question sat there, raw and real. He didn't have an answer. Not yet, but she was about to give him one. The powerful line is said. Ayaan looked down at his hands, fingers wrapped around the coffee cup as if anchoring him to something real. He opened his mouth to respond, but closed it again. There were too many thoughts, too many excuses, and none of them felt true anymore. Zara watched him quietly, then leaned forward, her voice low but unwavering. You don't need a perfect life to start living your real one. Ayaan looked up, startled. The words hit him like a wave, not loud, not dramatic, but deep, honest. They cut through the noise in his mind, the years of justifying, postponing, settling. Something inside him cracked open. Zara continued, softer now. You keep waiting for the right time, the right version of yourself, the right kind of success. But what if this messy, uncertain version of you is enough to begin? The words settled in the space between them like truth finally spoken. Ayaan didn't respond right away. He didn't need to, because in that moment, something shifted. In his chest, in his thoughts, in his silence. That single sentence echoed louder than anything he'd heard in years. And just like that, everything began to change. Immediate reaction. Ayaan froze, her words reverberating through him like a bell struck in still air. He stared at Zara, his expression unreadable, but inside, everything was moving. The usual reflex to deflect or laugh it off didn't come. Instead, his throat tightened. You don't need a perfect life to start living your real one. He repeated it silently, letting it sink in. A knot in his chest, one he hadn't realized was there, began to loosen. His shoulders dropped slightly, the tension he carried for years easing without permission. He felt exposed, like someone had reached into him and named what he couldn't. I don't even know who I am anymore, he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Zara gave a soft, knowing smile. Then, maybe it's time to find out. Not out there. In here, she said, gently tapping her chest. Ayaan looked away, blinking hard. His eyes stung, but he didn't fight it. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't trying to hold himself together. He was just feeling. It wasn't relief. Not yet. But it was something real. The first crack in the wall he'd built around himself. And he knew, deep down, that she had just opened a door he could no longer ignore. Flashback or realization? Ayaan's mind drifted, carried away by the weight of Zara's words. He stared at his coffee, but the cup blurred before him. His thoughts pulled him back in time, to when things were different. Back to university, when the world seemed full of possibility, and his dreams felt like they were just around the corner. He remembered sitting in the park with Zara, laughing about how they'd take on the world, how they'd chase their passions with reckless abandon. Ayaan had written so much back then. Poetry, short stories, fragments of novels. His heart was full of fire, and he had believed, truly believed, that nothing could stop him. But somewhere along the way, the fire dimmed. Rejection, pressure, fear. They piled on top of him like bricks, each one heavier than the last. He told himself that later would be the right time, that he'd write when things were stable, when he was ready. But the truth was, later had never come. He had been waiting for perfection, for the right moment, but in the process, he'd lost the spark that made him feel alive. Zara's words cut through the haze. He didn't need a perfect life. He never had. The realization hit him hard. He had been waiting for the wrong thing, waiting for permission to start living. The truth was, he had everything he needed right now. Change in perspective. Ayaan blinked, trying to clear the heaviness in his chest, but there was a lightness now, an unfamiliar sense of clarity. As he sat there with Zara, everything seemed to shift in his mind. The life he had been living, the routines he'd fallen into, suddenly felt like a series of distractions. He wasn't living for himself anymore. He was living to meet others' expectations, to tick off boxes in a life that wasn't truly his. For the first time, Ayaan saw how deeply he had buried his own desires under layers of excuses. His job, his friendships, his daily grind, they had all become safe choices, comfortable even, but they weren't the choices that sparked joy or purpose. He had been so focused on making it, the way everyone else defined success. He had lost sight of what made him feel alive. Zara's words kept echoing in his mind. You don't need a perfect life to start living your real one. What if it wasn't about waiting for a perfect moment? What if the messiness, the imperfections, the uncertainty, those were the real moments to lean into? He exhaled slowly. He didn't need to be ready. He just needed to begin. And with that, the world outside seemed brighter, less intimidating. His dreams felt possible again. Taking action. As the conversation with Zara wound down, Ayaan felt a quiet urgency rising inside him. The cafe, with its soft chatter and gentle clinks of cups, no longer felt like a place of refuge from the world. It felt like the beginning of something. Zara was wrapping up her tea, her calm presence a stark contrast to the storm brewing in his chest. He was no longer afraid of the future. He was ready to face it. The idea of writing, of truly pursuing his passion again, had been pushed so far to the back of his mind that it felt like a distant dream. But now, in this moment, he couldn't ignore it any longer. The world wasn't waiting for him to be perfect. It was waiting for him to take a chance. Without even thinking, Ayaan pulled out his phone and opened a new document. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, uncertain, but the familiar rush of possibility surged through him. He started typing. The words weren't perfect. They were messy, imperfect, but they were real. He was writing again. Zara watched him quietly, a knowing smile on her face. I knew you'd find your way back, she said softly. Ayaan didn't look up. He just kept typing, feeling a spark return to his soul, the first spark of many. Conclusion and transformation. Weeks passed since that conversation with Zara, and Ayaan's life began to shift in ways he hadn't imagined. He didn't wake up the next morning with all the answers, but something had been unlocked, a door that had been sealed shut for years. Every day he made time for his writing. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments when self-doubt crept in, but the difference was that he didn't let it stop him anymore. The words flowed, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes beautifully, but they were his. Ayaan rediscovered the joy of creating, of expressing himself in a way that wasn't confined by anyone else's definition of success. His job, too, became more bearable. He wasn't just going through the motions anymore. He started pursuing side projects that aligned more closely with his passions, finding satisfaction in the small steps forward. His relationships with friends, too, shifted. He stopped pretending to be someone he wasn't, letting the people closest to him see the real Ayaan again, the one who dreamed, who felt deeply, who believed in possibility. Zara had been right. He didn't need a perfect life. He just needed to start living. The transformation wasn't instant, but it was real. What she had said had changed everything. And Ayaan? He was finally living the life he had once only dreamed of.